Good morning.
Oh, hey, Mike.
How are you?
Oh, better not deserve. How are you?
Oh, you're right there.
It's true. I'm in the right spot.
Yeah.
Alrighty, it's time for us to go ahead and get started this morning. Last night, as we were doing our trunk or treat thing, it came to my attention that Ben and Rachel weren't going to be here this week. And so that meant I was on for this morning. So, what that means is we can either do one of two things, and I will take a little bit of a vote here and we'll proceed accordingly.
No quiz.
Not today, that's next week. Oh, you know what? That is a great idea, though. I might have to go for that. We can either trudge through Ben's notes, and I'll do my best with it, and that'll be it. Or we can do one of the bookmark style studies together where we break up into groups and discuss and reconvene at the end, in which case we will be able to have a sermon recap this coming Wednesday night for the sermon this morning. So, who would like to continue in the Hebrew study this morning? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Overwhelming. Oh man, put me on the spot. All right, well that's it. We're going to do Hebrews this morning. No recap Wednesday, and Mike is on to teach our Wednesday night class now. Put him on the spot.
It'll have to be on Thursday though.
Oh, shucks.
Show up if you want.
That's not scriptural, is it?
Oh, no. Well, we don't do things scriptural anyway, so it's okay. All right, Hebrews chapter 13. Go ahead and open them up, and we'll go ahead and get started in this. Hebrews chapter 13, verses 1 through 6. We're talking about a practice of faith in social relationships. That's going to have something to do with how we interact with each other, I would suspect. And so the writer says this: let brotherly love continue. Do not neglect to show hospitality to strangers, for thereby some have entertained angels unawares. Remember those who are in prison as those in prison with them, and those who are mistreated, since you also are in the body. Let marriage be held in honor among all, and let the marriage bed be undefiled, for God will judge the sexually immoral and adulterous. Keep your life free from love of money, and be content with what you have. For he has said, I will never leave you nor forsake you. So we can confidently say, the Lord is my helper, I will not fear. What can man do to me? Ben has for us here that the purpose of the chapter is to encourage these Hebrew Christians to put their faith into practice. Doctrine requires duty, and doctrines remain sterile without duty. What does that mean? That doctrines require duty.
Adherence to the doctrine.
Adherence to it, right?
Right.
What does it value us if we know what a doctrine is, but never actually put that doctrine into practice? Right? James chapter 2. Yeah, it's one of the things he has in the notes here. What does James chapter 2 talk about, Terry? I know you got this one. Faith.
One of them says faith without works is dead.
Right.
I said, what good if you have faith without percentage?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you got it, Terry. What good is it to say I have faith? Well, okay, how do I know?
And I'll show you my faith by my works.
That's right. That's exactly right. So I think that's an important point here, that doctrine requires duty. What you believe requires that we act upon whatever that belief is. And that doctrine remains sterile. It's unfruitful. It can't do anything apart from being enacted upon. One of the things that the author starts with, one doctrine we could say, is that we need to let brotherly love continue. And some cross-references there in your notes. As someone once said, we cannot be Christians without being brethren. Let's talk about the let brotherly love continue a little bit more. The fact that he says continue implies what? That it's been going on, right? How might we know that that was going on, aside from him just implying that it was? What are the fruits of that brotherly love being a part of the Hebrew church?
They met together all the time.
Okay, the fellowship, being together and gathering. Does anything take place in that gathering that might lend itself to brotherly love?
Worship.
Worship? Sure. It can. A lot of times our worship is very one directional. It's us to God and not so much to each other, but should it be that way?
And worship together.
We worship together. Is our worship supposed to encourage anybody? Right? Look to Ephesians, that's a good place.
If there's a need, you take care of that need. That
Okay.
has to be part of it.
Right? That's a good way of acting out that faith, right? If we see a need with one of the brethren and we close our heart to them, right? It's not good. So we want to make sure that we have our eyes open to serve those needs. Very good. Looking onward, he says, he continues with a familiar Hebrew practice to be hospitable. A natural demonstration of brotherly love is hospitality. What does hospitality mean? That's one of the things that we are charged with doing as Christians. Verse 2, do not neglect to show hospitality to strangers. All right, we'll break this down. What's a stranger, or who's a stranger?
Someone we don't know.
Someone we don't know. Okay? And we are supposed to show hospitality to those that we don't know. What does hospitality mean?
Love and sharing with them Jesus, and also providing for their needs.
That's exactly right. Exactly right. We want to show love to a stranger. And that's literally what the word means. Have you heard of the word xenophobia? You may have heard that in the news, which means you're afraid of people who are strange to you. The word in the Greek is xenophilia. You know what philia means, right? It means love. It means to love a stranger. And so that is one of the practices, one of the doctrines that Christians are to practice. Go ahead, Terry.
Good Samaritan.
Good Samaritan, prime example.
By far.
By far, that's right. We show love to strangers, that's hospitality. So how much more should that be a practice among those who are not strangers? Those of us who are part of the congregation here. If we're supposed to do it for strangers, how much more should we be hospitable to our brethren?
Much more.
Much more. That's right. So, I like to go off script. I'm not used to teaching like Ben does. How can we do that? We're supposed to do it. I think we have a desire to do it. Be hospitable to not only strangers, but to our brethren. How can we do that?
One would be to look at the flock and see if there's a need, if somebody's got a problem,
Mhm.
try to take care of that problem. Because we're one of your own, we're on our own.
Sure. Look out for those
But
needs.
you have to look. You're not gonna find it if you don't look.
It's true.
And you have to listen.
Look and listen. That's right.
Have to be in touch with one another.
Have to be in touch with them. If everybody's at arm's length and you're not invested in each other's lives, it's going to be all that more difficult to find those opportunities to be hospitable. So we can look for the opportunities, we listen, what are we hearing from each other? Hopefully we don't have to smell for opportunities, but you never know, right? We want to be hospitable. We should be hospitable. There are ways to do it. How come we have problems with doing that sometimes? What are some roadblocks that might crop up that prevent hospitality from taking place?
Too caught up in our own life.
We get busy.
Too caught up in just what I'm doing.
Yeah. Caught up in what I'm doing.
Trust.
Trust, right? Maybe if there's been some hardship or lack of trust or breaking of trust in a relationship,
We don't really
Can be
know
hard.
each other that well.
we don't know each other that well. It's hard to reach out if you don't know the person and kind of break the ice a little bit.
And we don't know what's going on in their life
Mm-hmm.
a lot of times.
Right.
A lot of times we don't say it too, though.
True.
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 We don't
don't always know what's going on because people don't trust us to know.
That's right.
They really don't.
That's right.
Does not follow what we talked about in our church on mission. You know, you have your circle,
Mm-hmm.
and then, I mean, you have your acquaintances, which is a big circle.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. And then you have family and friends, which could be a smaller circle.
Mm-hmm.
And then you have your best friends, which is even a smaller circle. So Jesus, he had his circle,
Mm-hmm.
but he also has an inner circle. 3.
That's right. You need to be able to have some close confidants that you can share your heart with more openly. You don't have to be an open book to absolutely everybody. So that's a good point.
And, you know, everything it deals with trust. And are you willing to, your best friend, you've already opened up yourself to that,
Mm-hmm.
knowing full well that they'll keep that in confidence.
Right. That's right. Any other comments on there? Go ahead, Mike.
I think sometimes we're afraid that we're going to be perceived as being nosy.
Mm-hmm.
We're afraid to start the conversation because we're afraid that person will be, kind of off, standoffish because we maybe got too close,
Mm-hmm.
and they say just back off. But I've noticed that most of the time, those people are looking for someone to get involved and help them, but they don't know how to ask, so we still have to reach out, even if we are perceived as being that way, and we're not, and I think we're afraid to even start to get involved,
Sure.
and so that's one of the hindrances that we have. Is again, it comes down to fear, but I know a lot of times it's like, if they need something, they'll call. If they need, and most people, we're proud. I'm sorry, most of us are. Yeah, we don't want to bother anybody with our problems,
Mhm.
this kind of thing. So,
Yeah.
those are a couple of stumbling blocks.
How many times have you ever wanted to pick up the phone and call a brother or sister? Be like, they're probably busy. I don't want to bother them. But you talk yourself out of it.
Don't bother them.
Yeah.
And I tell people, if you know people in the congregation, and some maybe outside, tell me, because I'm supposed to be involved with that. If I don't hear nothing, then we can't help.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, communication's key there, isn't it? That's right. Well, there's all kinds of roadblocks and reasons not to be hospitable, but at the end of the day, we can't let those things win out, and we need to be able to find ways to do it. That's the bottom line for us. So I think some things that have been mentioned already, keeping our eyes open and our ears open to those opportunities, and then just taking the risk to love somebody, despite what you think they might perceive from you or anything like that. Does that make sense? It's not easy. It's not easy to open up your home to somebody or get together with somebody if you're uncomfortable. But I think generally if somebody were to say, hey brother or sister so-and-so, I'd really just like to get to know you better. You want to go grab a cup of coffee or something like that and talk? I suspect many of us would be very receptive to that. And I think we should do that some more.
We can't pick and choose who we help.
No, but even so, just investing into each other's lives and getting to know each other, that was one of the barriers.
You like somebody a little bit better than somebody else,
Mm-hmm.
you don't do just for them.
Right. Right. Oranges. Go ahead, Jude.
Good morning. As I'm reading this, the preacher is actually, he's addressing this to brethren.
Mm-hmm.
These are not strangers that he's addressing this to. And of course, it's a lot easier to be hospitable to a brother or a sister in Christ, or even in your family, versus a stranger. But you can still do that because he also says angels unaware.
Mm-hmm.
So it could be a stranger. But I think his focus is on a brother or sister in Christ.
That's right.
And it's also based on Verse 3, remember those who are in prison. And I'm thinking those are the brothers and sisters who have been in prison because of their faith.
Mhm. I'd say so. There's certainly some application there. Anybody else before we move on? Harvey table's awful quiet this morning. I might have to pick on somebody over there later on.
Let's move on.
Well, let's move on. And now we have a volunteer. All right, let's scooch onward here a little bit. Let's see. Hospitable. What are some of the reasons for hospitality being so valuable in the early church? You have the issue of persecution, Christians being dispersed all over the place. How important is it for Christians to be able to come together? Hospitality is a great way to make that happen. You had traveling evangelists like Paul and others that would need a place to stay. You have the needs of the poor. There are poor people all over the place, and the church had a prime opportunity to reach out to those individuals in need. A practice that was fairly common back then was keeping strangers in your home with you. That has certainly fallen away, and we understand why, but it is a practice of theirs.
Yeah, in the public square of a village or a town,
Mm-hmm.
there was somebody in the square. There was supposed to be a person that would go and put them up for a night.
Mm-hmm. It's hospitality. That's right. Inns in the first century, Palestine were often dirty, immoral, expensive, etc. You don't want people staying someplace bad. You have examples like Abraham, who was hospitable to the angels before realizing they were angels, so on and so forth.
Question,
Yep.
inns in the first century. Well, Peter wanted to take Mary to an inn.
Mm-hmm. They was poor. That's all you got.
Well, he wanted to take him to an inn. Dirty, immoral, and expensive.
Yep.
Or all of the above. So he ended up in a cave.
Mm-hmm. Yep. Something to think about.
Yeah.
Something to think about. Preacher further reminds his congregation to remember those who endured imprisonment, persecution for Christ. In other words, he encouraged them to simply practice the golden rule. Who can remind me what the golden rule is?
You want others as you want you.
That's right.
And then run.
And then
Well, is that, I think we mentioned this in one of our other studies just recently, the golden rule. Does that apply to both parties, or does that apply to the first party?
should apply to both.
But,
In practice, sometimes it's unilateral and not bilateral.
that's correct.
Yeah.
So what do?
You do what you're supposed to do.
Uh-huh. It's not up to that other person.
Mm-hmm. Yep. Person B treats you like trash, then
You hadn't right.
yeah.
Well, what does Paul say about your enemy? When you do good to them, what are you doing?
Keeping up coals.
Putting coals on their head.
Mm-hmm.
Love you, mean it.
That's right.
Well, if you do something nice for somebody, or you're hospitable to somebody, and possibly they'll pay it forward, you giving it to them,
Yeah.
that's on you.
Uh-huh.
Them giving it to somebody else, that's on them.
Yeah.
That's up to them.
Uh-huh.
You did what you used to do and move on, do it to somebody else,
Yeah, so if
Out of 10, if you get 9, to just say, okay, no, thanks, don't do anything.
but if we do that for somebody, are we really expecting a payback?
No.
No.
Uh-uh.
That's what I mean.
Yeah.
Once you've made that commitment to somebody, that should be it.
Yeah.
And then let them, I think we read about that, but I'll forgive you, and then the other guy comes and says, you owe me money, and I'm not gonna forgive him. Well, that's on him. That's on you. You did right with him.
Mhm. That's right.
That's
exactly right.
Just move on. Don't
That's-
expect it.
That ties into where the Bible talks about our love being genuine. We can love disingenuously with some kind of an ulterior motive, like I'm wanting something back out of this. But genuine means like you don't have other other little things mixed in there. It's,
Yeah.
it's a pure,
There's no agenda.
No
tied-
agenda.
Tied to that.
Well, we pick and choose. I mean, sometimes we do, I think we always had this thing, you wanna help somebody along the freeway that's broken down, you go over and help, and you realize it's, some, high-paid athlete, you help them out, now you got a friend, but the guy who can't pay it back, you kinda let them go.
Yeah.
So you pick and choose who that would be by your
Do you salute them?
receiving end,
Only if you're an officer.
So, and you hope that you do pay it forward, but that shouldn't stop you from doing it again. Even if it's the same person,
that's right.
it's tough to do. I helped you twice, I'm not gonna do it again.
I've run into that. Not me personally, but, one of my real close friends has run into that. And he's gotten burned 3 times, same person. So, that bridge got burned.
Yeah,
This ain't about me.
it's a tough one.
Mhm. All right, let's venture on here a little bit. After his remarks about those enduring persecution, the need to practice what we call the golden rule, he says the preacher instructs the congregation to honor marriage and to keep it pure. Why might that be a problem that needs to be addressed? These are Christians after all.
Human nature.
No, there was Roman culture, and the culture of the day was polygamy, temple prostitutes. Prostitution was still, it was still there. Polygamy.
Mhm.
So that was,
Right. There's still a very strong cultural influence that they have to live among, right? Those cultural influences very easily make their way into the lives of just regular, ordinary Christians. So they need to be on their guard against such things so that those things don't inundate the church and cause additional problems.
any difference today?
Not really. You could say it's worse today because you can have a brothel in your hand at all times. I mean,
They never fall.
they never. Okay.
And it's sad
Uh,
by the unicorn, sorry.
But the accessibility that we have in our culture today to sexual immorality is unmatched compared to ages past. You don't need to go very far in a conversation about that to know that it's a huge cultural problem. And to say that it can't make its way into the church just because we're Christians is naive. So it's something to be on guard about.
That would be it could be one of human nature for one. Lust of the eyes,
Lust of the
lust of the
flesh.
flesh, pride of life.
Mhm.
They still follow into that, and that's where Peter tells us to be on guard. And not only Peter, a lot of the writings tell us, be watchful,
Mhm.
because he's gonna trip you up.
That's right. Yeah. That category of sins has a way of just permeating into somebody's life very deeply, causing all kinds of problems. So that's especially important to look out for.
So, as a result, someone is caught up in that.
Mhm.
We had mentioned this last week, I believe. Who does it affect? What is the runoff of that sin once it's discovered?
Well, it does depend a bit on the situation, but certainly the parties involved in it,
Parties involved,
their families,
church.
the church family. If there's any offspring due to that, you've involved that into the situation, which can then go on to have some generational impact from there. So
So it's a
it can cause
snowball.
problems. It can snowball.
It just, even though it might have been conceived, well, look, we talk about David as an example.
Mhm.
That snowball.
Yeah. Yes, it did.
Him and Bathsheba. And then Uriah, one of his mighty men,
Mm-hmm.
then the baby, and then David's family.
Yep.
So,
And what did the Lord say about David's family after all that went down? He said, the sword will not depart from your family. And what happened? You guys know, what happened to David's family? Were they all lovey-dovey, nice to each other?
no, they tried to take over his kingdom.
They were killing each other, brothers and sisters. Yeah, it got really ugly. And what was the kernel or the root of that problem? Came down to a sexual sin, David and Bathsheba. It's really where the snowball came over the hill, so to speak.
But he was a man after God's own heart.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
That's hard to understand.
Didn't it?
Well, he knew he did wrong,
Yeah.
and he asked God for forgiveness, and God did. God forgave him, but there was a consequence to it.
That's right. All right. The last warning that is made here is a warning against covetousness. It's not a word that we use a lot in our modern vernacular. So we say, thou shalt not covet. 10 Commandments say that. Still in effect, we should not be people who covet things. What is covetousness?
Putting things above God.
Ultimately,
Essentially, you know,
yeah.
I know a guy years ago who said he doesn't do as much cycling because he was putting that he thought above Christ.
Okay.
So he doesn't compete or anything like that. That's something that I'm very familiar with, but I don't hopefully put it above what I'm supposed to be doing.
Mm-hmm.
Hopefully.
It's really too wanting what somebody else has or what you see.
Wanting what somebody else has, yeah.
Therewith to be content.
What's that?
So therewith to be content.
Therewith.
Yeah, therewith. Everything that happens around you, be content with what you have. Don't go after anything else.
Right. That's what it would be to avoid covetousness, right?
Yeah, and I think one of the issues we have sometimes is,
Could have.
we may never say it, but it's like, I worked really hard for this, and I'm not gonna share it with you. You didn't do anything to help me get it here, so.
Right.
Go somewhere else and.
Why should you have what I'm
Yeah,
getting?
why should I give you this, cause I'm the one to work for it?
Mm-hmm.
That's wrong.
Well, then
Yeah.
you have the idea that, well, then you have the idea that you worked really, really hard, but somebody else got the reward. And you're thinking, wait a minute, how did that happen?
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yep.
be content with what you have.
Yep.
Even the sparrows get fed.
That's right. Yes, yes. Covetousness is one of those real subtle, sneaky sins that can creep in there unawares. And then by the time you're already doing it, you're like, oh,
Oh, yeah.
there it was. Like,
Look what I've done.
yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, the pride element is really closely connected to covetousness in a lot of situations.
Does a
Calling on you, Terry. You looked at me and smiled. So
Does a materialistic world encourage covetousness?
What's that? Sorry.
Does a materialistic world
What's wrong with you?
encourage covetousness?
Sure.
Sure. Yeah, and when you're constantly putting out things to desire, materialism, then covetousness surely follows.
You need this.
Yeah,
Definitely.
Yeah.
yeah.
And
You
we see
need this. That guy has it. Want what he's got. Yeah.
What was that? There was a commercial. I don't see it anymore, but this guy, he was well-to-do. He was, he was a member of a golf course. He was with his buddies on the golf course. He has a beautiful home. He has a nice-looking car, good-looking family, and he's he's mowing his lawn on his nice. You know what I'm talking about?
I'm in debt up to my eyeball.
There it is. Yeah. Somebody please help me. Uh-huh.
Yeah.
And to me, that's Western society.
Keeping up with the Joneses, I think is the phrase.
That's what the whole idea was, with that commercial, because I think it was, something to do with, debt relief.
Yeah.
That's right. Interesting note, Ben has down here in point 3, contentment cannot come from material possessions, no matter how much someone has. The example he uses here is that of Solomon in Ecclesiastes. What can you tell me about Solomon's life that would tie into this?
All is vanity.
What was vanity?
He was so wise that he understood that it's just a waste anyhow.
Chasing after the wind.
Yep. Solomon was extremely wealthy. There's some who say, you know, if you adjust for inflation and all of that, that he was the most wealthy guy who had ever walked the face of the earth.
Bill Gates first.
Yeah, like more than Bill Gates. He was
Yeah,
just
even more than Bill Gates.
exceptionally wealthy. In terms of his gal pals, wives or otherwise, how many of those did he have?
700 wives and 300 concubines.
Yeah, more than one, right? way more than one.
Why?
Yeah,
Why?
Wanted to
He had everything that a carnal man could ever want in the entire world and more. And yet he says, end up what?
All is vanity.
It's vanity.
It's all greed.
Useless.
It doesn't ultimately satisfy anybody.
Take it with you.
Can't take it with you. Right. Terry?
If God wanted one man, one woman, why did he let Solomon have 1,000 of them?
Same reason he lets us commit all kinds of sins. Did Solomon learn at the end of the day?
Yeah, he
At the
did.
end of the day.
Yeah, he did.
He allowed Solomon to make his bed, and then he had to sleep in it. And
Then he took the
Needed
king.
more than one.
yeah, yes.
What's that? What was
Yeah.
that, Mike?
Needed more than one.
You went there, brother. But
I mean, think about that crown, man. You figure out birthdays.
we're gonna have a lot of folks on the front row this morning.
I'm up there all. How about their names? You know,
Yeah. Who are you again?
Who are you? Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
You were Tuesday, all right.
But back to the point. Back to the point. At the end of the day, he learned that everything that I've accumulated, everything I've done is a huge waste because God was not in charge of it. He wasn't a part of it.
Yeah.
Huge waste. There's a lot of lessons.
Well, I'm
Go
sorry.
ahead, Terry. Go ahead, Joe.
As a result of his actions, of course, God told him what was going to happen
Mm-hmm.
because the kingdom would be, how did he say that? It would be split or something like that.
Mm-hmm.
And, but not in his lifetime, be with his son.
Yep.
And so there was a consequence. But we still live in that kind of society today.
Yep.
I want this, I want this. Okay, we're coming up on the holiday season pretty soon.
Mm-hmm.
And when you see a little child, all right, how many of us remember the Sears catalog?
Oh, yeah.
That culmination of Christmas for a kid. Circle what you want. Was there ever a page that didn't have a circle on it? Uh-huh. All right, so we see that, and again, that's that materialistic. As you get older, though, maybe some of that starts to fade away because,
The toys get bigger and more expensive.
yeah, well, yeah. Uh-huh. But
But.
it is. It's who's going to get all this stuff when I'm gone?
Mhm. That's right.
I think Terry had a.
Yep. Go ahead, Terry.
I'd like to do Luke 12,
Sure.
13 through 21 without going to it.
Okay.
It starts out, I'm looking at it. It starts out with a guy going to the Lord and telling him, have my brother, whatever, give my portion. And then he goes on and he talks about the rich young person, got a lot of money. And the individual says, oh, okay, he says, I'll tear down my barns, I'll build bigger barns.
Yeah.
And the Lord says to him, you fool, this night your soul or your life will be required of you.
Mm-hmm.
What was the reasoning behind this?
His focus was not on the Lord.
But right, but it says that he was rich, not towards God,
Mm-hmm.
but he was rich towards himself.
That's right.
And see, I think I was put in there for a reason. That, and people don't like this a lot of times when they talk about it. When we're not rich towards God in our giving,
Mm-hmm.
that's not correct. We cannot deal off of the bottom. We have to put him first, we have to be rich towards him, and part of that is giving. And I understand they say that the number one problem in a marriage in the United States is money.
Mm-hmm.
And it is hard to, a lot of times to give, but you have to, like I think of him first. It should be a thing that you love to do. It's not something, I gotta do this again.
That's right.
Because to me, maybe I'm all wrong on this, to me, it shows appreciation going back to what he did for us, especially the last day.
Right.
How much do I appreciate that? Do I or don't?
Right. You're right about that. Giving is a fruit of a grateful heart. When it's not something compulsory like we've talked about in the sermon. It's something that comes from the heart, and that's the heart of the issue. It's not the quantity. We want to give as much as we can, right? We should, if that's where our heart's at and where it should be. But it is a heart issue, and then being stingy towards God or not having a desire to participate in that at all really reveals a heart issue more than anything else.
And we're not gonna take it with us, we've
No.
said that over and over again.
No.
It's
It's true.
came in with nothing, you're gonna leave with nothing. Deeds.
And
If you can make it quick, I got one more part.
he owns everything.
Yes.
Anyway,
Yes, yes.
and Pam said, that in our marriage, we've never had a problem with money, because we never had any.
Yeah. Yeah, if you start out broke, you know, it's okay. All right. Tying into this concept of covetousness, there are two promises that the author brings up that address the problem. When covetousness is reigning, it creates a void of I want, I need, I gotta have in an unhealthy way. But there's two promises made here that I think, when you really dig into them, answer the problem that covetousness creates. Where God says, I will never leave you nor forsake you. How can that address the problem of covetousness? I want, I need.
He's gonna be with us, he's gonna help us,
Right?
regardless.
You might feel like you really want, you really need this thing, but God is going to be present. He's going to be there. He's going to take care of what you actually need, right? Never leave you nor forsake you. And if you actually look at the context of that, it's talking about money. Back in the Old Testament, it's talking about money. Your financial needs will be met. There's something to that as well. And then the follow-up promise is, the Lord is my helper, and I will not fear. What can man do to me? How can the help and security that the Lord provides answer the problem of covetousness?
We're dependent on him and not on money.
That's right. That's exactly right.
The Old Testament, he said, you brought them. And they said, how have we brought them? Like your tithes and your offerings.
Mm-hmm.
That's about as clear as you get it.
That's
I
right.
don't wanna be robbing God.
Right. That's right. But the the security that we have in the Lord and with the Lord and through the Lord should supersede any insecurities that lead us to become covetous of what my neighbor has. Does that make sense? See some head shaking? I'll take it. All right. We're going to wrap it up there. Save the rest for Ben. Thank you for your participation this morning. And we'll see you for worship.